Hi, I'm Rachel, and this is my page 112 tag video for August 2026. This is also my Buzzwordathon video for August 2026, and if you want to go to that part of the video, click to this timestamp right here. So, the page 112 tag was brought to BookTube by Sean Breathes Books. He based it off of a literary prize from France, I believe, where the long list was comprised solely by reading page 112 of the books in contention. And all of these books are novels. And in the standard size novel, page 112 is supposed to be in the middle, somewhere past the polished for editors pages, where you get to the raw, real story. And without the context of the rest of the story, you can only judge the book based on the quality of the writing on said page. Technically speaking, maybe. Anyway, I have been using this tag since the beginning of COVID to whittle down my physical TBR shelves while slowly building them back up again. I have this handy dandy books and cats mug, and inside there are pieces of paper, and all of these pieces of paper are physical titles I have on my shelves that I acquired in 2025 or earlier. And each month I pull 3 random pieces of paper out of this mug, and then I read page 112 with you and decide on which one of the books I will add to this month's TBR. That being said, over the last couple of months I have found the utility in cheating. And that in fact is why this piece of paper is hanging outside the mug already, pre-chosen. Because like in those other months, I've decided to pre-choose a book in large part because I have too many reading goals and not enough time to read them all, and I'm reading for the BookTube prize, and those are all my excuses. So with this particular month, my thought is that I do have one book in my physical TBR that is a translated book written by a female author, so that fits for Women in Translation Month. So I figured I could, kill 2 birds with 1 stone, as it were. And so that means here would be my book number 1, and that is Aquarium by Yara Shahori. And so, video over, that's what I intend to read this month. Actually, no, I'm not going to be ending the video here because I have decided to pick my next 2 books more traditionally, and my favorite of these 2 I will be utilizing in my November page 112 tag, which is the next time I'll be using all of my runners-up for this month and the next 2 months. Anyway, so there is still, some part of this game that I'm kind of playing accurately, so here we go, and I will now be searching for book number 2. Trying to really be as random as possible with all of these stuck together, pieces of paper. So here we go. So book number 2 is She's Not Home by Lena George. This is a book I've played with in the past. I've had it on my shelves for a couple of years now. It's an indie published book about, I think, a family with a lost, disappeared daughter/sister. So yeah. And finally, I'll go for book number 3. We'll see if I prefer it to book number 2 or not. But yeah, this is just 1. Alrighty. And book number 3 is going to be The Dutch House by Ann Patchett, which feels very apropos because in my last book haul, I actually hauled her latest book. And she's going to be at the National Book Festival in a couple of weeks. And so I was going to hope to see her. And I do have, this one other older book of hers on my shelves. So it, of course, would have been appropriate to read this month, but I don't think it's going to happen. But, it might happen further down the line. All right, you've seen me pick out these 3 books. I am going to go ahead and read page 112 to myself and then return to give you my thoughts, so stay tuned. Okay, I'm back. It's a little later in the day, so I turned on some artificial lights, but I've come to the part of the video where I am ready to share the page 112s. Starting with book number 1, Aquarium by Yara Shahori, which I picked up from my Friends of the Library bookstore back in November of 2024. I heard voices from the outside, even though I sometimes struggled to decide if the conversation I heard with half of an ear took place on television or in the next room. In my ears, even the tick-tock of clocks sounded uniform and resolute, threatening to overpower the rest of the voices with its monotony. This was the kind of thing that Dory talked about. By the time I heard the clock, it became clear to me how strange it was for so much to hinge on its ticking. I thought about searching for my old watch that Dory loved so much and I never agreed to loan her. I don't know where it wound up, if anywhere. She heard the watch almost unconsciously, and now it was my turn. But as close as I tried to listen, for me it remained just a stupid ticking that caused things to move and come back. Maybe that's not so strange. Dory and I never liked the same things, except when we had no choice. I really had the surgery. That's the missing detail. I was operated on even before we left, Uriel and I. Small children are better candidates for the implant, but I convinced them with signs and wonders until they agreed and acquiesced. I received a full subsidization and 3 days of hospitalization in a room with a standard curtain that gave off a smell of industrial cleaners. I was implanted. I crossed the line. From the hospital, I returned to the home of the Savion family, and 5 weeks later, when the implant was already working and I had gone through the first training, I showed up at our place. Uriel wanted to come with me. I said to him no. Even he understood. I expected the house to look smaller, like a memory from another time, but it was exactly its size. Alex's fencing of crooked metal surrounded the house, as always, sparkling in the sun, impersonating something beautiful. Everything was quiet. The hum of the electric wires almost couldn't be heard. The Ackerman family was a large magnet of silence, and it seemed that the sound of everything in its vicinity had been erased. Okay, and now we get to the point where I have to justify, since I already predetermined I'd be reading this month, why this could be intriguing to me. Because it is very in media res. We don't have many names, or at least not for the protagonist. We have this vague allusion to a surgery, which certainly seems to me from the context clues what might have something to do with the narrator's hearing. Although, there's a lot of emphasis on auditory sound, starting with small sounds like the clock being kind of loud, but then sort of sounds that used to be loud before the surgery that also this narrator really wanted, even though maybe she wasn't the right age for it. Those sounds were more muted. And I'm saying she because I do have, I'm not supposed to, I suppose, have this, but I have some recollection that this is a story about sisters, and that's where the Dory character comes in. I don't really know who Uriel or the rest of the characters are, but I think there's the sense of these two sisters, and, there's some tension there, and there's a lot having to do with hearing, and that's going to be a major sense. And so that's something I'll be trying to pay attention to as I read this novel, and it's a reminder to me because I feel like when it comes to reading novels, the easiest things to latch on to are dialogue and to visual cues because for a lot of us, that's our most primary sense. But I'm going to be curious to see how auditory cues continue to play out in this novel. And I'll also say, since this is a woman in translation pick as well, that it was translated by a man, Todd Hassak Lowry, from the Hebrew. Book number 2 was She's Not Home by Lena George. I have had this since April of 2023, which I picked up due to April being Indie Bookstore Day in the US, although I didn't go to a store for this. I bought it straight from the indie publisher, which I'll link to down below. And I have played with this book in the past, so huzzah, I can just insert an already made clip. What? The phone felt so useless. She couldn't even see him. Not that she ever wanted to see him again, but hitting him might actually have made her feel better. What are you talking about? And where are you? She ignored his last question. When did Tim Wagner... She squeezed her eyes shut. He couldn't know she was crying. I'm so confused. What about Tim? I'm about to drive Brandon and Todd home, so I can't really talk. A gust of wind roared through the phone. Hold on. A door slammed. Okay, I'm in my car, but this has to be quick. He seemed so far away. It felt impossible that he was sitting in the parking lot of the school they both attended, a place where they'd claimed to be each other's best friend, that their previous life had even existed. But obviously it had, somehow, and somehow they had also gotten here. She took a breath and tried again. This afternoon, Tim Wagner came up to me and said," Tim had been so casual about it, and now she couldn't even force out the words. "Tim what?" "I didn't tell him about that stuff I don't care if you didn't tell him." The prospect of listening to him explain how he hadn't actually walked up to Tim and told him, as if that could possibly be the issue, made her want to throw the phone against the wall. "At this point, I'd feel better if you did." Jeremy sighed. "Well, that makes sense. Can you just tell me why you're calling?" "Can you not be an asshole?" "Okay, not trying to be, but I have no idea what you want me to say here." "Well, then I don't either." Mariana didn't know what, exactly, she wanted from this conversation. Okay, so on second read, I am comparing it a bit to the first one, that like we're in media res again, but in like middle of conversations and all of that. But actually, thinking now about how this remains rather unclear in a way. We don't even get the names of the two people talking, Jeremy and Mariana, until the very end of the page. And most of what they're talking about is this interaction with this Tim Wagner guy and like this maybe, tense moment from the past between the two of them that might have come up with Tim Wagner, I guess, but it's all very vague on the page. We don't know what they're talking about. The only way we'd have any idea is if we had context from the rest of the story. The only thing I could assume really is that they are school friends or were school friends and are now in a more fraught situation. But, the page seems to very much just be about them talking around each other and not really connecting. And I mean, if we had the context, this could work in terms of like understanding their characters and the way that they operate, but certainly it gives us really little context on the page about what actually is going on between these characters, which is so different that even though in the other book, there was such a variety of characters, I think you could really zero in on the specifics of the tension almost immediately. So that's an interesting, comparison, and it certainly makes this book a little less feasible, I suppose, for winning the page 112 tag. And finally, book number 3 is The Dutch House by Ann Patchett. I've had this book for maybe the least amount of time. I got it from the Gaithersburg Book Festival last year in 2025. Which technically also was from my friends of the library, just not their official used bookstore. They took their wares out to the book fest. But anyway, let's get to the page. I shook my head. "Make yourself go. I'm going back to sleep." She dropped down hard on the edge of the bed, making me bounce a little. "We go to church. That's what we do." I turned over on my back and opened my eyes grudgingly. "You're not following. Up, up. I don't want anyone hugging me or telling me how sorry they are. I want to go back to sleep." "They'll hug you this Sunday, and next Sunday they'll just wave like nothing ever happened." "I'm not going next Sunday either." "Why are you being like this? You never complained about going to church before." "Who would I have complained to? Dad?" I looked at her. "You win all the fights. You know that, right? When you have kids of your own, you can make them go to church every morning and they could say the rosary before school. But I don't have to go. You don't have to go. We don't have parents. We can go out for pancakes." She shrugged. "Get your own pancakes," she said. "I'm going." "You don't need to do this for me." I raised up on my elbows. I couldn't believe she was carrying her point so far. "I don't need a good example." "I'm not doing this for you. Jesus, Danny. I like going to Mass. I like believing in God, community, kindness. I buy into the whole thing. What in the hell have you been doing in church all these years?" "Memorizing basketball stats, mostly." "Then go back to sleep." All right, I really do like this. I mentioned before how, dialogue is one of the easiest things to latch onto, and that's really all that's on this page. There is very little in here that is not dialogue, to the point where we only get the name of one of the people in the story. And anyway, the context, we get a lot of context about what they're actually talking about, which seems to be that they're trying to go to Mass. It seems like they might be siblings. That's sort of the context clues of their relationship. They talk about a parent they might have in common, except then it comes up that, the parent actually isn't there anymore. Maybe the parent is the thing they have to feel sorry about, although maybe not, because it seems like whatever, uncomfortable, sad feeling that the Danny character is concerned about, it would only come up once during one weekly service. But anyway, he obviously doesn't want to go, even though it seems like this has been a constant thing for him. So I guess in a way that's very surprising if he hasn't had other, external pushes to go, because it seems like he can, very easily push past this sibling's desire for him to go. And that's obviously a point of contention between the two of them, because the sibling gets something out of the community and out of the religious experience. And I have to say, I really liked the whole, like, what have you been doing in church, memorizing basketball stats? I thought that was a pretty funny line. So yeah, I don't know a whole lot about, or I don't feel the emotional intensity really of what's going on. I mean that, I don't, there's no humongous context about, the loss they've recently had, why they have this history of going to church when one of them obviously doesn't want to go very strongly, but they do have this history, and we don't know why the other one has a desire to go to church and, that past history. But I have to say I'm pretty intrigued by this one. So I'll come to the point where I, debate these two books about which one's going to be in my runner-up space for November. And I really do feel like, in these, both of these, we have examples of heavy dialogue and relationships, but, this one continues to be very vague, and they're really not talking to each other directly at all. And part of that does feel intentional about what their issue is with each other, whereas in this one, they are talking pretty directly. They have a very concrete, problem in front of them that, church is going to happen, and one of them wants to go and one of them doesn't, and one of them wants both of them to go. So, maybe it's a more simple issue that they're talking about here than in this book, but I can't help but think that, this book is not afraid to, put people's, feelings on the page and to make, the conflict more explicit. And, sometimes that's just kind of nice. So many stories can hinge on the fact that somebody just doesn't want to communicate or is bad at communicating. And I kind of wonder if that is what's going on in this book. Well, but basically this book has always been pretty hazy, so every time I've played with She's Not Home, I've put it aside, which I feel bad about, but I have put it onto the Goodreads, my Goodreads TBR list to make sure that, I will ultimately read it. So I guess I feel okay in putting it down again. And for my runner-up book, I'm going to put The Dutch House by Anne Patchett, although, my official book I will be reading for August, and for the Women in Translation prompt is Aquarium by Yara Shahori. Okay, and moving on to Buzzwordathon. Those of you who are active on YouTube might be familiar with Buzzwordathon, which is put out annually by Kayla from Books and Lala. This is a readathon, a yearly readathon that she bases off of publishing trends. And she started by making, prompts based off of recent publishing trends that apply to titles of books. And then a couple of years ago, she added a different set of prompts for cover designs, and what's trendy and what she's seen around the publishing world. And so a couple of years ago, I glomped onto this because I had acquired a large TBR one month from an event called Raid the Shelves. Raid the Shelves is an event put on by the Jewish Book Council, which is an organization whose website I basically live on. And once a year, most years, they invite their audience, to purchase a ticket that gets them into their Manhattan office with, suitcases and bags and what have you, to cart out as many books as possible. And they have so many books that they acquire from publishers and what have you. And so I have taken part in this for 2 years, and I come out with so many books, and I'm looking for a justification for how ridiculous this is to travel to Manhattan and to drag so many books home. And so I'm using the Buzzwordathon cover prompts as my way of getting through several of these books in the year. So every month I have been addressing each new prompt for 2026 this year. And as you can see, I've been very diligent every month in fulfilling each prompt. in so far as I can, because, I think a lot of these prompts that Kayla finds or crafts have to do with genre books, I think, and trends in genre publishing, whereas a lot of the books that I brought home from Raid the Shelves are more general fiction. So sometimes the one and one don't exactly jive. So once again, I guess I'm kind of cheating or fudging things, although in this case, the rules just don't quite match up. So anyway, for August, our cover prompt is damage, which means that the cover should have something that looks like damage, within the design, not for it to be actual damage, which could be a way to get around it, I suppose, if you have a torn cover or something. But it's supposed to be within the design of the cover some sort of damage, which I really didn't have at all. So I think this might be my most creative flex all year. I don't know. I say, or maybe last month was, but anyway, this month I'm going for Another Side of Paradise by Sally Koslov. And this is a book that dramatizes the affair between F. Scott Fitzgerald and the Jewish Londoner photographer or journalist Sheila Graham. And so I thought this had to do metaphorically with damage because it's, an affair. First of all, and Scott's wife, Zelda, was, I believe, at this time in sanatorium. So anyway, I figured I could try to get, around this prompt that way. And that about covers it for me now. I will leave Goodreads links for all of these books mentioned in case you'd like more information. I'll also leave links to all of the places where I've acquired my page 112 tag books and information on the Buzzwordathon prompts. And, my playlist for old page 112 tags and the other quarterly TBR game I play. I do have a lot of fun with these. But with all of that being said, it is time to move on to actually reading for my month's TBR and reporting back to you. So expect me back on this channel within the next couple of days with my first AM reading update of August. Stay tuned for that. In the meantime, I hope all of you who are playing games are having fun with the books you choose, and for those of you who are reading with the BookTube prize finals with me, that we're slowly getting through, what we need to before the end of September, which is, I'm sure, it's a lot closer than I'd like to believe. It always kind of sneaks up on me, so I guess I gotta kind of remind myself that I have to read those books as well, which I'm also looking forward to. So anyway, thanks so much for watching, everyone, and I'll see you next time.